had always liked driving at night. There was something about the quiet hum of the engine, the way the headlights cut through the darkness, that made me feel untouchable, like I was in control of a small world of asphalt and dim yellow lines stretching forever into the night. That night, I was driving home after a late shift at work. The highway I chose was not the main route. It was longer, slower, but it cut through a stretch of countryside that was practically empty, with nothing but fields and forests on either side. I liked it because there were fewer cars, fewer distractions, and more of that still, endless dark that made the road feel like it belonged only to me. It started innocuously enough. The first thing I noticed was the road signs. They seemed older than usual, the paint faded and peeling, with names of towns I had never heard of. Some of them looked like they hadn't been maintained in decades. I remembered thinking it was strange, but I had driven through similar stretches before. The night was clear, the sky filled with stars, and the air felt crisp through the open window. My headlights illuminated the empty road, reflecting off the occasional reflective marker, creating small, rhythmic flashes that almost felt like a heartbeat. About an hour into the drive, I noticed a strange pattern of lights in the distance. At first, I thought it was a car, but as I approached, it became clear that there was nothing there. The lights hovered in a strange formation, almost like they were suspended in midair. My first reaction was to slow down. I glanced around the forest edges and fields, half expecting a farm or a house, but there was nothing. Only the road stretched ahead, straight and narrow, cutting through the endless black. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was probably the reflection of my headlights off a distant sign or some old reflective tape on the guardrail. As I continued, I noticed something else: other cars. Or, more precisely, the lack of them. I had already passed dozens of intersections, rural roads, and side streets, and yet I had seen only one other vehicle. It had been a pickup truck going the opposite direction. After that, nothing. No lights in the distance, no moving shadows, not even deer. Normally, even on a quiet highway, there would be a random car, a semi-truck, someone's taillights in the distance. This complete absence of movement made the drive feel heavier, slower, almost like the night itself was pressing in on the car. Then the first sign of trouble appeared. My car's engine started to stutter, a soft, irregular vibration under my feet, like the pulse of the asphalt through the tires. I glanced at the dashboard. Fuel was full, engine temperature normal, but the stuttering persisted. I tried slowing down, shifting gears, and even revving the engine a little, but nothing helped. The vibration grew stronger, more insistent, until I could feel it in my chest. Panic started to creep in, but I told myself it was just mechanical. Maybe the car had a spark plug issue, maybe something was loose. I forced my hands to steady on the wheel and kept driving, eyes scanning the black edges of the road for any sign of help. The highway itself began to feel different. The road markings, the reflective lines that had seemed so normal before, now looked distorted. In my headlights, they shimmered like water, moving slightly as if the road surface itself was alive. I shook my head, convinced my tired eyes were playing tricks. But then I saw something move. Not in the trees, not along the edge of the highway, but in the lane ahead. A figure, crouched low, darted across the asphalt. I slammed the brakes. My tires squealed, and my heart pounded in my ears. When I looked again, there was nothing. No shadow, no shape, just the empty black road stretching ahead. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it. Maybe it was an animal, a deer, a coyote, but something about the movement had been too human, too deliberate. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something behind me, but there was only darkness. No lights, no movement, nothing. The highway had become a tunnel of black, endless and suffocating. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. Every mile marker I passed seemed older, rusted, and worn in ways that didn't match the rest. Some were bent, others completely missing. The road signs seemed to get stranger too, with town names I had never heard, spelling that seemed slightly off. I started noticing things about the forest edges: trees with broken branches that looked almost deliberately snapped, leaves scattered in patterns that felt unnatural. It was subtle at first, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the road itself was different here, that I had somehow left the highway I knew. Then my headlights caught something in the middle of the lane, a car. A sedan, old and battered, its paint peeling, one headlight missing. It wasn't moving. I slowed to a stop behind it, unsure what to do. No lights inside, no movement, no sound. I considered calling for help, but my phone signal was gone. Not even the faintest bar. I tried the horn, nothing. I inched forward, careful to not touch it, and as I passed, I caught a glimpse of the interior. Dust, torn seats, and a broken rearview mirror. Empty. The unsettling thing was that it looked abandoned, yet freshly used. Tires seemed recently pressed into the asphalt, as if it had been there just moments ago. I tried to shake it off, telling myself this was a rural road. Abandoned cars could sit for months. But then the engine stuttered again. And this time, I felt it something under the car, a vibration so strong it rattled the entire chassis. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I glanced at the rearview mirror instinctively and froze. The road behind me had changed. The lines were different, cracked in ways they hadn't been before, and the edge of the road seemed to fall away into a dark void. I couldn't see the forest anymore, only black. A panic I had never felt before surged. I forced the car into neutral and coasted slowly, trying to remember my bearings. My mind raced with impossible explanations: tiredness, hallucination, mechanical failure, but deep down, I knew none of it made sense. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe, as if the night itself was pressing down. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating small sections of asphalt. But every time I looked further, the road seemed to stretch unnaturally, turning and curving in ways that defied logic. I had just started to feel truly trapped when I saw lights in the distance. Not floating lights, not strange patterns, but real, human-made lights. A gas station. One of those old 24-hour stations in the middle of nowhere. Relief washed over me like a flood. I accelerated carefully this time, but with purpose. As I approached, I saw it clearly: a small, concrete building, dimly lit, with a flickering open sign. The lights inside were normal, the pumps worn but functional. My hands finally relaxed on the wheel, the stuttering of the engine subsiding as if the presence of this small, human outpost grounded the world again. I parked and got out, stretching and taking deep breaths. Everything outside smelled of gasoline and night air, ordinary smells that suddenly felt like safety. The attendant looked at me, blinking, normal, human. I filled my tank, checked my engine, and even managed a shaky smile as I realized I had no mechanical issues, nothing wrong at all. Just exhaustion. My pulse was still racing, but the highway seemed behind me now, a bad memory I had survived. I left the station slowly, taking the long route back onto the main highway. Everything was normal here: the lights of passing cars, the predictable bends, the familiar signs of towns I knew. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other road still existed somewhere, just out of reach, waiting. I realized then that what had scared me the most wasn't a ghost or some supernatural force. It was the raw, disorienting strangeness of being truly alone in the world, with nothing to guide me, nothing to confirm that reality was still the same. I made it home safely, locked my doors, and stayed awake for hours, staring out the window at the quiet street. In the end, the highway hadn't hurt me physically, but it had left a mark, a reminder that the world is sometimes stranger than we understand, and that even ordinary roads can hide corners where logic falters and fear thrives. I never took that route again, and I never underestimated the power of darkness and isolation, or the way a simple, empty highway at night can feel like an entirely different world. I was driving late at night, the kind of late where the world feels empty, and the quiet presses against your ears like a weight. The highway I was on was long and winding, the kind that cuts through nothing but stretches of dark trees and abandoned farmland. I had been on the road for hours, my headlights illuminating only a few feet ahead, and the radio had long since gone dead. Even static felt like company at that point. The air inside my car was stale, and I found myself gripping the steering wheel tighter, as if that could somehow keep the darkness outside at bay. The The highway had no streetlights, just the faint, dying glow of distant towns that seemed to flicker and vanish as I approached. The pavement was cracked in places, and I could see the white lane markers fading under years of neglect. On the side of the road, old signs leaned at odd angles, some missing letters, others rusted so badly that their warnings were meaningless. One said, "Bridge out next 5 miles," but I couldn't see any bridge anywhere. I had learned to ignore them, but a part of me still registered the warning. It was around 2 in the morning when I noticed the first car behind me. It wasn't close at first, just a faint pair of headlights that flickered in the distance. I didn't think much of it. I was used to seeing other late-night travelers on long roads like this. But as I drove, the car seemed to stay at the same distance behind me. Not approaching, not falling back, just following, patient and steady. I tried speeding up. My car wasn't fast, but I pushed it to 80 miles per hour, hoping the other driver would pass me. They didn't. I slowed down, hoping maybe they were just cautious, but they matched my speed exactly. It felt deliberate, though I didn't know why. My heart began to thump in my chest, the steady rhythm of the engine failing to calm me. Every turn I took, every rise and fall of the road, the headlights were there, unwavering. Hours of driving, or maybe only minutes, it was impossible to tell. At that point, I began to notice strange patterns along the road. Every so often, I would see things that didn't make sense. A car flipped over on the shoulder, old and rusted, as though it had been there for years. Tires scattered across the grass. A small, burnt-out shack with its roof caved in. These were the kinds of things you could tell yourself weren't real in the daylight, but at night, surrounded by darkness, they gnawed at the edge of your mind. Then the first accident happened. Or maybe it wasn't an accident. I can't know for sure. Around a bend, I saw a large truck lying on its side, spilling some sort of dark liquid that shimmered under my headlights. The truck's cabin was smashed, and I couldn't see any driver. My instinct told me to slow down, maybe stop, maybe turn back, but another thought, irrational and primal, told me not to. I didn't stop. Couldn't. I pressed on, my knuckles white around the steering wheel. The further I drove, the stranger things became. I noticed that mile markers were disappearing. At first, I thought it was my eyes, the fatigue catching up. But no, there were stretches of road where not a single sign, not a single marker existed. Only darkness and the faint, rhythmic sound of tires on asphalt. I tried to focus on the lines of the road, but they too seemed to fade in places, blending into shadows that shouldn't be there. The road itself felt alive in a way, like it was pressing up against the car, trying to swallow it. The car behind me was still there, always there. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, that it had been waiting all along for me to notice. I checked my rearview mirror, careful not to stare, but it never blinked, never faltered. Its headlights were steady, cold, and focused. Then, the most unnerving part of all, I realized I couldn't remember how I had gotten here. Every turn felt familiar, yet unfamiliar. Every tree, every curve, every rise in the road seemed like it belonged to a memory I had never lived. I tried to think back to the last town I had passed, the last exit, the last rest stop, but nothing came. I had driven in silence for hours, but it didn't feel like hours. It felt like days. The strangest moment was when I passed a small gas station. The sign read, "Open 24 hours," in broken neon letters. I slowed down, thinking maybe I could get gas, maybe a coffee, maybe some kind of human interaction to remind me that the world still existed. But the pumps were dry, the windows blacked out, and no sound came from inside. It was as if the station had never existed, as if I had imagined it entirely. I drove past, my stomach twisting, the sense of being watched growing heavier. I had almost given up hope when I saw the exit sign for a major highway. Relief, almost sweet, filled me. Maybe if I reached that road, I could finally find civilization again. I took the exit, but the road was different. It was wider, better maintained, and the signs were clear. The headlights of the car behind me disappeared, though I didn't feel the relief I had expected. The tension in my shoulders remained, and my stomach was a knot. I drove for another hour, until finally, the sky began to lighten. The first hints of dawn revealed the landscape. Rolling hills, a river cutting through farmland, and a small town ahead. I could see smoke rising from chimneys, hear the faint hum of early morning traffic. I exhaled, finally allowing myself to relax. I had made it. Whatever that stretch of highway had been, I had left it behind. Later, when I tried to tell people about it, I realized no one would believe me. It wasn't supernatural, there were no ghosts, no monsters, but it was real in a way that made the blood run cold. Some highways are haunted not by spirits, but by history, by neglect, by human tragedy and accident, and the way roads can twist your sense of time and direction until you don't know where you are anymore. I had driven a stretch of road where accidents had piled up, where signs had decayed, where isolation became suffocating. And for a while I was trapped in it. Even now, I remember the feeling of that highway pressing down on me, the headlights that never blinked, the strange stretches where nothing existed, the dead truck, the broken shack. It was a haunted road in every sense that matters. And I survived it not through luck, but through determination, through refusing to stop, through refusing to let the fear paralyze me. I drove through the night and into the morning until the ordinary world returned, and I could finally breathe again. I never went back. I never needed to. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that stretch of highway. I think about the way the road can twist your mind, how it can make you doubt yourself, how it can make you feel like you are followed even when you aren't. It was terrifying, yes, but it taught me something too. The world is bigger than you think, and even in the darkest places, you can find your way out if you keep moving, if you keep driving forward, even when nothing makes sense. I was on a long haul from Dallas to Minneapolis, hauling a load of construction equipment. The sun had set hours ago, and the highway stretched in front of me like a dark ribbon. My rig's headlights cut through the night, but the darkness beyond was absolute, unbroken except for the occasional reflective signs. I had been driving for almost 14 hours straight, and my body was screaming for a break, but the delivery was time-sensitive, and my paycheck depended on getting it there on schedule. The road was empty, the kind of empty that makes the mind play tricks. I kept my hands tight on the wheel, eyes darting between the road and the mirrors. Every so often, I'd see a shadow on the shoulder or a patch of reflective tape from a sign, and my heart would jump. I had been driving long enough to know it was just my brain trying to make sense of the darkness, but that didn't make it any less real. Somewhere near a stretch of road lined with dense forest, I noticed something odd. A car was pulled over on the right shoulder, hazard lights blinking. I slowed down a little, curious but wary. No one was around. I figured it had broken down. I kept my distance, moving to the left lane, and glanced in the rearview mirror. The car stayed put, lights still flashing, the road empty except for me. I shook my head and tried to focus on the road. My eyes felt heavy, my eyelids burning. I reached for a bottle of water and took a sip, trying to fight the sleep creeping in. Trucking nights are always the worst. The isolation, the silence, the monotony of the dark road, it messes with your mind more than anything else. Then I noticed it, a pair of headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just another truck, catching up, but it wasn't moving like a normal vehicle. The lights stayed at a constant distance, never closing, never falling back. I adjusted my mirrors and checked again. Still there. I tried not to panic. Maybe it was someone lost or someone driving cautiously. But the highway was empty, and the road I was on was straight for miles. Whoever it was should have passed me by now. I kept glancing back, and the lights stayed the same distance, perfectly aligned with my truck. I took a deep breath and slowed down to see if it would pass. The lights mirrored my speed. I sped up. The lights mirrored me again. My chest tightened. Something didn't feel right. I remembered a rest area about 20 miles ahead. I decided to head there, hoping whoever it was would keep going past me. I flicked the turn signal and shifted lanes, watching the lights, and they followed. By now, my hands were sweating on the wheel. I tried to keep calm, but every instinct was screaming at me to do something. I tried calling dispatch, but the radio crackled only static. My phone had no signal. Typical. I had driven this stretch before, but never at night. felt different now, more threatening, more alive. As I approached the rest area, I realized there were no other cars, not even parked. I pulled into a spot, keeping my truck's engine running. I sat there, gripping the wheel, watching the mirrors. The car followed me in, perfectly aligned with the path of my truck. I didn't even hear it slow down. I felt a surge of fear I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a weird coincidence. Someone was following me, staying just far enough back to remain unseen in the shadows, but close enough that I could feel it. My mind raced through options. There was no one around to help. If I left the truck, I'd be exposed. If I drove off, they'd follow. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, thinking, planning. My body was tense, every muscle ready to spring. I knew I had to act smart. The rest area had an exit that led to a frontage road, which in turn connected back to the highway a bit farther down. If I could get onto that road, maybe I could lose whoever it was. I started the truck, slowly moving toward the exit. The car mirrored my movements. I felt my stomach knot. I had to be careful, make it seem like I was just driving normally, but my mind screamed at me to speed up. As I turned onto the frontage road, I noticed a small diner a few miles down. The lights were on, a beacon in the darkness. I made up my mind. I'd head there. There were people, cameras, and the possibility of help. I kept my speed steady, trying not to alert the driver behind me. The car followed. No hesitation, no braking, just perfectly following. My heart pounded, my grip on the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. I remembered a trick I had learned years ago. Sometimes, a long, sharp turn could make someone who was tailing you overshoot, especially at night. I approached a sharp curve on the frontage road. I slowed down more than usual, hugged the inside lane, and watched the mirrors. The lights behind me took the curve too wide, and for a moment, I thought they might lose control. They adjusted quickly, but I gained a small lead. I didn't stop. I drove as fast as I dared, eyes fixed on the diner's neon sign in the distance. Finally, I pulled into the parking lot, engine roaring, tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat there, breathing hard, looking out at the dark road. The car stopped at the entrance to the lot, engine idling. I could see a dark silhouette behind the wheel, but not much else. I watched for a few minutes. Then, slowly, the car backed up and turned onto the highway again, disappearing into the night. I sat there for a long time, letting my heart slow down. I finally climbed out of the cab and went inside the diner. People were chatting, the smell of coffee and fried food filling the air. I sat at a booth near the window, staring at the dark road outside, still half expecting the car to come back. I called dispatch from the diner's phone, explained what happened. They told me to take the next few hours off, wait for daylight, and head back onto the highway with caution. I agreed, too shaken to even argue. By the time I left the diner, dawn was breaking. The sun lit up the highway, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I drove carefully, constantly checking the mirrors, but there was no sign of the car. Eventually, I merged back onto the main highway, still tense, but calmer. When I reached Minneapolis, I unloaded the equipment without incident. I took a long shower at the truck stop afterward, trying to wash off the fear that clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't explain why the car had followed me, or who was behind the wheel, and I didn't want to know. I just knew that night would stay with me forever. A reminder that some dangers aren't monsters or ghosts, they're real, human, and patient. After that run, I changed my routes, avoided traveling alone at night when possible, and always made sure someone knew exactly where I was. That night taught me that on the road, you can never be too careful. The highway can feel empty, safe even, but sometimes someone or something is waiting just out of sight, watching, and willing to follow. And when you're alone in a truck with no one to help, it's up to you to stay alive. I never saw that car again. I never found out who was in it or what they wanted. But I still remember the way the headlights stayed in my mirrors, unwavering, relentless, like a predator testing its prey. And even years later, when I drive at night, I can't help but check the mirrors one more time, just in case. I was driving back home late one winter night. The sky was a deep black, the kind of black that swallows everything around it. My car's headlights cut through only a small stretch of the road ahead. I had taken a shortcut I didn't usually take, a long stretch of highway that ran through the countryside. I didn't think much of it at first. The road was empty, except for the occasional tree bending against the wind and the soft sound of my tires rolling over the cracked asphalt. At first, it felt peaceful. The wind whispered across the fields beside the highway. I noticed how quiet it was, almost unnervingly so. I couldn't hear any distant cars, no chirping of crickets, nothing but the hum of my own engine and the occasional creak from my car's suspension. I tried to tell myself that it was just normal, that it was just a long, deserted road, and that I had nothing to worry about. But after a few miles, I started feeling uneasy. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, but there were no signs, no mile markers, no lights from houses. Just black trees lining either side like silent watchers. Every now and then, I would pass a bend that seemed sharper than it should be, and my headlights would catch glimpses of shadows along the side of the road. At first, I thought it was deer or bushes, but there was something about the way they moved, slow and deliberate, that made my chest tighten. I couldn't see anything clearly. The shadows seemed to retreat as soon as my lights hit them, melting back into the darkness. Then I noticed the signs. Rusted, old metal signs that didn't make any sense. One of them had peeling paint and barely visible letters. "Stop ahead." I laughed nervously, telling myself that it was probably some leftover old sign from a construction project. But then, not 10 minutes later, another one appeared, this time completely blank. A sign with nothing on it, just a rectangle of rust. It was standing straight and tall, like it had been placed there intentionally. I didn't remember passing a sign like that before. My unease grew as I drove. I tried to focus on the road, but every few minutes, I felt like I was being watched. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see another car, another driver, someone following me. But the road behind me was always empty, nothing but black. The wind started picking up. Branches from the trees scraped against my car, making a scratching noise that sounded almost like nails on metal. My headlights caught glimpses of broken guardrails and tire marks in strange patterns on the asphalt, like something had skidded off the road long ago. After about an hour of driving, I noticed the first car. It was far ahead, just a dim pair of headlights, moving slowly in the opposite direction. But as I drove, I realized it wasn't moving steadily. It slowed down, then sped up, sometimes stopping entirely in the middle of the road before moving again. Something about it felt unnatural. I kept watching it in my rearview mirror after I passed it. It seemed to linger behind me, just at the edge of sight. When I tried to speed up to get away, my car shuddered as if the road itself was resisting. Then I reached the old bridge. It was narrow, with metal sides corroded by years of rain and ice. I had been on highways with old bridges before, but there was something wrong with this one. It didn't feel right. The planks beneath the asphalt creaked under my tires, and I could see water rushing far below through gaps. I drove slowly, but the bridge seemed to stretch on forever, as if it had no end. I could still see the other car's headlights ahead, but every time I thought I was catching up to it, it would vanish. After the bridge, the road curved sharply, and the trees on either side grew closer, their branches reaching toward my car like fingers. I thought I could see shapes moving in the shadows, crouched low, keeping pace with my vehicle. My pulse spiked, but I told myself it was just my imagination. There was no one there. There had to be no one there. I glanced down at the speedometer. My foot pressed hard on the accelerator, but I wasn't gaining any ground. The road seemed endless, dark, and empty. Then the engine sputtered. My car jerked violently, and I pulled over to the side, my hands shaking. I tried to restart it, but the engine wouldn't turn over. I was in the middle of nowhere, no cell service, the dashboard lights flickering weakly. I got out of the car and looked around. The trees seemed impossibly tall, stretching up into the darkness, their branches moving even though the wind had calmed. That's when I heard it. A faint tapping sound coming from behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned, but there was nothing. I got back in the car, locked the doors, and tried again. The engine caught, but it sounded weak, like it had been running for years without maintenance. I started driving again, more cautiously now, hugging the center of the lane. Every few minutes, I would see something in the corner of my eye, a flash of movement, a glint of something metallic, but when I looked, there was nothing there. The road seemed to stretch and twist in ways that didn't make sense. Sometimes it felt like I was going in circles. Hours seemed to pass. The sky remained black, unbroken by stars or moonlight. My coffee had gone cold in the cup holder, and my eyes were raw from staring into the darkness. Then, just when I felt like I couldn't drive any longer, the road widened slightly, and I saw a faint orange glow in the distance. Relief washed over me. I drove toward it, and as I got closer, I realized it was a small diner, still open, its neon sign flickering weakly. There were a few cars parked outside, and I could hear the faint sound of voices and dishes from inside. I pulled into the lot, the gravel crunching under my tires, and parked as close to the door as I could. For the first time in hours, I felt safe. I stepped out of the car and stretched, taking deep breaths of the cold night air. I didn't feel like looking back at the highway, didn't want to see the endless black that had been chasing me. I went inside, paid for a coffee, and sat in a corner booth, still shaking. I watched the road through the window. In the distance, the highway stretched back into the darkness, quiet and empty. I realized then that I had no idea how long I had been driving or how far I had come. The highway had felt alive, but now it seemed just like a normal stretch of road again. I didn't tell anyone about it. People would think I was imagining things, that I had been tired or stressed. But I knew what I had felt. Eventually, I rested, drank my coffee, and waited until sunrise. The sun rose slowly, painting the fields gold and the trees green again. When I finally got back on the highway, everything was normal. The signs made sense. The road followed the map exactly. The shadows had vanished. The strange car was gone, and the bridge no longer felt endless. I drove home slowly, grateful for the light and the familiarity. Even now, I think about that stretch of highway. I know it was real, even if it doesn't make sense. I know there was something in the darkness that night, something that made the road feel alive, something that made it seem like it wanted to keep me there forever. But I made it out, and I got home. The world looked normal again. The highway was just asphalt and trees. And yet, I can still feel it sometimes, the memory of the shadows, the endless black, and the sound of something moving just out of sight. I never take that shortcut again. I was driving home late one night after a long week at work. The roads were empty, the kind of emptiness that presses against your chest, making every mile feel longer than it really is. My car's headlights cut through the darkness in thin, trembling lines. I had chosen the highway because it was supposed to be faster, but it was a stretch I hadn't driven in years, a bypass that curved through dense woods and open fields, where the light poles were few and far between. First, the drive was uneventful. The hum of the engine and the occasional rumble of tires over cracks in the asphalt were the only sounds. I passed abandoned gas stations and old diners with their neon signs flickering in broken patterns, like they were struggling to stay awake long after everyone else had gone home. The kind of places that looked like they had been left behind decades ago, frozen in time. I kept my eyes on the road, not stopping, not slowing. There was a pull in me that wanted to just keep moving, to put as much distance between me and the emptiness as I could. As I drove, I noticed that the highway was narrower here. The shoulder was little more than gravel and weeds, and the guardrails were rusty and dented. I passed a few large trucks parked off the side, their lights off, engines cold. Nobody was around. That was strange, but not alarming. I had seen trucks pulled over at night before. What unnerved me was the silence. No wind, no rustling trees, no animals. Even the crickets seemed absent. The kind of silence that sits on your chest and doesn't let go. A little while later, I saw something ahead on the road. At first, I thought it was a deer because of the way it moved, a sudden figure darting in front of my headlights. I slammed on the brakes, heart racing, but there was nothing there when I stopped. The road was empty the way it always had been. My pulse settled slowly, but I felt a prickling at the back of my neck. I looked in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following, but there was only darkness. Nothing. The highway twisted sharply here, cutting through a narrow stretch of forest. The trees leaned over the road, and their shadows made the asphalt look uneven, like it was moving under the car. I had to slow down to keep control. That's when I noticed tire tracks in the dirt along the side. Old tracks, but fresh in some places. Someone or something had been driving here recently. My mind started racing, imagining all kinds of scenarios. A stranded motorist, a trucker taking a shortcut, maybe even a lost person trying to find their way. I tried to calm myself, telling myself it was nothing, just an empty road in the middle of nowhere. Then I saw the first car. It was parked halfway on the highway, facing the wrong direction, headlights off, engine cold. A small sedan, black, unmarked. First, I thought maybe it had broken down. That would make sense. But as I got closer, my stomach tightened. There was something off about it. It looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry, doors slightly open. The passenger seat pushed back, a faint scuff on the asphalt nearby like someone had stumbled. No lights in the distance, no sign of anyone around. I slowed, passing it carefully, eyes darting to the sides of the road, looking for movement. Nothing. The rest of the drive grew stranger. I started seeing cars parked in unusual spots, off the side of the road, some with doors open, some empty. There was a red pickup truck with the back hatch open, the bed empty except for a single crate. There was no one in sight. My chest tightened each time I passed one. Every shadow seemed to twitch. Every distant glimmer of light felt like it might be a person watching me from the trees. Then it happened. My tire hit a pothole, sending the car jolting. I pulled to the shoulder to check for damage. Nothing, thankfully, but when I looked up, I saw someone walking along the edge of the highway. A man hunched over, wearing dark clothing. He didn't wave, didn't make a sound, just walked slowly, almost dragging his feet, staring straight ahead as if he didn't see me. I felt my pulse spike, adrenaline flooding my veins. My first instinct was to lock the doors and drive on, but something made me pause. He wasn't moving with purpose. There was something in his gait, hesitation, uncertainty, fear even. I drove past him slowly, keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror. He didn't move, didn't react, didn't even glance at the car. The emptiness around him made him seem unreal, like a figure dropped into a black and white photograph. I drove on, heart hammering, trying to shake the growing tension. The strangest part of the night was that the highway seemed endless. The road kept winding through the trees, and every time I thought I saw an exit or a town, it disappeared behind another curve. The miles blurred together, the landscape a monotonous mix of dark trees and road. Then I started noticing the signs, old, rusted, barely legible, that warned of dangerous curves, narrow bridges, and steep grades. All of them were accurate. The highway was treacherous. I began to understand that the fear wasn't just from the empty road or the abandoned cars, it was from the way the road itself seemed to trap you, to keep you moving in a loop that had no escape. At some point, I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle for miles. Not a single car going in either direction. Not even distant headlights. My headlights reflected off something ahead, and I slowed. It was another car, flipped on its side in the ditch. The metal was crushed, paint scratched, glass scattered. No one around. No sign of help. My stomach twisted. This was no accident waiting to happen, it was the aftermath of something that had already gone wrong. Something that the world had left behind. Fear clawed at me, but I kept going. I didn't want to stop. Stopping meant being trapped, and something in the emptiness of the highway made me feel like stopping was dangerous. The road twisted sharply again, and I saw a bridge, an old steel structure, rusted and creaking under its own weight. I hesitated, gripping the wheel, heart hammering. But I had no choice. I had to get across. As I drove, I felt the metal shiver beneath the car, the boards groaning. I kept my speed steady, eyes fixed on the end of the bridge, refusing to look at the water far below. Finally, the road straightened. I could see lights in the distance, faint, orange glimmers of a small town. Relief washed over me like a wave, and my grip on the steering wheel loosened. I was exhausted, adrenaline draining, but the danger was over. The abandoned cars, the silent walkers, the endless winding road, all of it felt like a nightmare as I pulled into the first open diner I could find. I parked, shut off the engine, and sat in the car, staring at the glowing signs, trying to convince myself that it had all been real. The town was quiet, but alive. Lights on in houses, the distant hum of a late-night convenience store. People moving, normal, nothing strange. The contrast was jarring. The highway I had driven through didn't exist here. It was like a separate world, a pocket of silence and danger that ended the moment civilization began. I finally got out of the car and walked inside the diner. I ordered coffee, sat at a corner booth, and let the warmth seep into me. I thought about the cars, the figures, the empty road. It didn't make sense, but I told myself this. I had made it. I had survived. The highway had been scary, yes, but it had no ghosts, no magic, just isolation, bad planning, and danger that comes from human error and neglect. And I had driven through it. I had reached safety. That night stayed with me for years. I never took that highway again, but I learned to trust my instincts. Empty roads in the dark are more dangerous than anyone can imagine. Not because of monsters, but because of the way they exploit fear, isolation, and the unknown. And sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what's there, it's what could be. Waiting silently on the side of the road, hoping for a mistake. I was hauling a load of industrial chemicals across the Midwest, a long stretch from Chicago to Denver. It was mid-October, the kind of late fall night where the wind bites even through layers of clothing, and the sky hangs low and gray with heavy clouds. I had been on the road for almost 15 hours straight, the kind of long haul where every mile blurs into the next and fatigue makes the road feel like it's moving beneath you in waves. My rig was a 2016 Peterbilt, reliable, but even the best trucks can't fight exhaustion. The dashboard clock read 2:47 a.m., and the highway was almost deserted, just me, my rig, and the constant hum of the tires on asphalt. The road had been straight and predictable for hours. Cornfields on either side stretched out in dim shadows, black shapes that seemed to sway in the wind. My headlights cut through the dark, reflecting off patches of wet asphalt from a light rain earlier. Everything felt normal at first, almost boring, but that kind of monotony is dangerous on these roads. That's when I first noticed a shadow moving along the edge of the highway. At first, I thought it was a deer, but as I got closer, the movement didn't match anything I recognized. It was too large, too slow. My eyes caught a figure crouched by the guardrail, hunched over, not moving in the way an animal would. I slowed slightly, more out of caution than fear. Fatigue was making my mind play tricks, but something about the figure didn't sit right. My eyes scanned the road ahead, making sure there was nothing I might hit. But when I looked back, the figure had vanished. My pulse quickened, though I tried to calm myself. Probably just a shadow, I told myself, maybe a person working on something by the roadside. I shrugged it off and pressed on. For the next few hours, nothing happened. I cruised at a steady 65 miles per hour, occasionally catching a rest stop sign in the distance but too tired to pull over. The fatigue was heavy, pressing down on my eyelids, and I felt a dull headache forming behind my eyes. My rig's cab was warm, the heater blowing softly, but the warmth did little to keep me alert. Around 4:30 a.m., as the highway curved through a wooded stretch, my rig's headlights picked up something else, another figure. This time, it wasn't at the edge of the road. It was in the middle of my lane. I slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, the trailer fishtailed slightly, and my stomach dropped. My heart was pounding in my chest, loud enough I could feel it in my ears. The figure was tall, thin, and wearing dark clothing that blended with the night. I couldn't see a face, just the outline of someone or something standing directly in front of me. I swerved slightly to avoid it, hugging the shoulder. The truck shuddered violently, the trailer fishtailing again, and I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. And then, just like that, it disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next nothing. No sound of footsteps, no movement off the road, just empty asphalt. My breathing was ragged, hands trembling on the wheel. I took a deep breath, tried to shake off the panic, and reminded myself I had a job to do. My rig's engine hummed steadily, but every sound outside the cab, the wind, the rustling of the trees, made me tense. By the time dawn broke, the tension hadn't eased. The highway was quiet again, and the shadows of the cornfields were long and gray under the weak sunlight. I passed a small roadside diner, almost empty at this hour, and I pulled over for a coffee. My hands were still shaking when I got out of the cab. I kept glancing over my shoulder at the highway, half expecting the shadow to appear again. The diner smelled of burnt coffee and fried eggs, a comforting reminder of normal life, but my nerves were on edge. I tried to reason it out. Fatigue makes you see things, makes the mind play tricks. I must have been imagining the figure in the lane. Maybe I was seeing deer in the shadows, or a person walking along the shoulder. But deep down, I knew what I had seen wasn't an animal. The shape, the way it had appeared in the middle of the lane and vanished instantly, was deliberate. I left the diner after a short break, feeling a little more grounded but still cautious. The next few hours were uneventful, the sun climbing higher, cutting through the lingering fog. I crossed into Colorado in the late morning, following the winding highways through hills and valleys. By now, the adrenaline had faded, replaced by a dull, tense vigilance. Every curve, every stretch of open road, felt like it could hide something waiting to jump out. Around mid-afternoon, I stopped at a rest area near a small town to refuel and check the rig. That's when I saw it again, not a figure, but something even stranger. At the edge of the parking lot, there was a car abandoned in the shadows of a grove of trees. The driver's door was open, and inside, it looked like someone had left in a hurry. Papers were scattered across the seat, and the engine was cold. No one was around. My gut twisted. I stayed in the cab for a moment, watching, but there was no sign of movement. I called the local sheriff's office to report it, explaining the situation as clearly as I could. They told me they'd send someone out, but the nearest station was 20 miles away. I decided to wait at a safe distance, staying in my truck, engine running, lights on. About 30 minutes later, a sheriff's SUV arrived. The officers checked the car thoroughly and eventually told me it had been reported stolen the previous night. Whoever had been driving it had taken off, leaving it behind. They couldn't tell me much else, but I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. The stolen car, the shadows, the figure on the highway, it all felt connected in a way I couldn't explain. I continued my journey, alert more than ever. The sun was low in the sky by the time I crossed the last stretch of highway before Denver. My rig rattled over a rough patch of asphalt, the headlights catching dust and leaves in the fading light. I thought about the miles behind me, the long stretches of lonely highway, and the things I had seen that couldn't be explained. The fear never fully left, but I learned to channel it, to keep it as a sharp awareness rather than panic. I finally rolled into the delivery yard just after dark, exhausted, but relieved. The chemicals were unloaded safely, paperwork signed, and the yard supervisor gave me a nod of approval for getting the load in one piece. I climbed out of the cab, legs stiff, back sore, and took a long look at the city lights in the distance. Felt like stepping back into reality after a nightmarish dream. That night, when I parked the rig in the lot and finally let myself relax, I replayed the entire journey in my head. Every shadow, every fleeting figure, every unexplained thing that had made my pulse race. I realized that the highway wasn't haunted by anything supernatural, it was haunted by the unknown, by the unpredictability of the road, and by the way fatigue and isolation can twist your perception. But I had made it through, alert enough to keep control, cautious enough to stay safe, and lucky enough that nothing had actually harmed me. As I lay in the small bunk of my truck that night, sleep finally taking me, I felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Fear had been my constant companion, but it hadn't stopped me. I had faced the long, dark miles and the things that seemed impossible to explain, and I had delivered my load safely. That, I realized, was the real ending. Life on the road is unpredictable, sometimes terrifying, but it's about endurance, caution, and keeping your wits sharp. The highway will always be full of shadows, but with vigilance and luck, you survive, and that's more than enough. I had been hauling freight for close to 15 years, and in that time I thought I had seen it all. Long nights on empty highways, storms that could shake your rig like it was made of paper, drivers doing things that made you question humanity. It all became routine. But there was one stretch of highway, a forgotten ribbon of asphalt in the middle of nowhere, that I'll never forget. Not for ghosts or monsters, nothing like that, but for the way fear can live in the real world, quietly, without warning. It was a weeknight in late autumn, the kind of night where the wind cuts through the cab like a knife and the darkness seems thicker than usual. I was running a load from Omaha to Albuquerque, a long haul through states that blur together when you're staring at the same road for 12 hours straight. I had just crossed the Nebraska-Kansas border and was aiming for a small truck stop 100 miles down the highway. I was tired, but I had enough coffee in me to keep alert. The highway was almost deserted. There were occasional headlights in the distance, but mostly it was just me, the rumble of the diesel engine, and the sound of tires on the worn asphalt. I had done this route countless times, but this particular stretch always gave me a bad feeling. It wasn't that anything had ever happened there, at least not that I knew, but it had a way of pressing in on you, as if the road itself was watching. I noticed it first when my GPS flickered and then went blank. That wasn't unusual in rural Kansas, but something about the timing made my stomach tighten. I glanced at the fuel gauge, half a tank. Plenty to get me to the next station. I shrugged it off and kept driving, keeping my eyes on the road. Then I saw the truck. It was parked on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking faintly in the distance. Nothing unusual about a breakdown on a lonely highway, but the way it was positioned felt off. It was angled awkwardly, facing toward me even though it should have been pulled to the side. I slowed down, instinctively, and as I passed, I noticed the driver. He was slouched over the steering wheel, completely still. No movement at all. I didn't stop. My gut told me not to, and after years on the road, I'd learned to trust that instinct. Something about the stillness felt wrong. The road stretched ahead, empty, and I pushed the truck a little faster to shake the unease. A few miles later, the feeling didn't go away. It got worse. I started noticing subtle things that didn't make sense. The lines on the highway seemed inconsistent, fading in places, worn down beyond what the miles of traffic could explain. Reflectors were missing or broken, and the occasional road sign was tilted at impossible angles. Then came the debris. Not much, just small rocks and a few pieces of metal, but the pattern was strange. It was like something or someone had scattered it deliberately. I thought about calling in, but my radio was acting up too. Static, bursts of faint chatter that didn't make any sense. Every time I tried to get a clear signal, it cut out. My phone had no service. For the first time in years, I felt truly isolated. Just me, my rig, and the highway that seemed to be shifting in ways I didn't understand. Then came the lights. Not headlights from oncoming traffic, but small, bright lights flickering in the distance along the roadside. At first, I thought it was reflections from my own mirrors, but the lights moved. Slowly, like they were floating above the ground, and they seemed to appear and disappear randomly. My rational mind screamed that it had to be something simple: road maintenance. Reflectors catching the moonlight, but it didn't feel right. My pulse was picking up, and my hands gripped the wheel tighter than necessary. The worst part was the silence. There were no sounds except the engine and the occasional gust of wind. No animals, no distant trucks, not even the usual hum of the tires on rough asphalt. It was like the world had been muted, leaving me alone with the creeping dread that something was wrong. I kept driving, trying to keep my mind on routine. Watch the mirrors, check the gauges, maintain speed. But the feeling didn't go away. Then I saw movement in my mirror's shadows crossing the highway behind me. I turned to look, expecting maybe a deer or some other wildlife, but there was nothing, just darkness and the faint, flickering lights along the shoulder. My heart pounded. I told myself it was fatigue, paranoia from long hours of driving. But then my truck started behaving strangely. Nothing mechanical. I knew the feel of a rig too well, but my headlights began flickering in sync with the strange lights along the road. For a moment, I considered pulling over to rest, but instinct told me not to. Pulling over here felt dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. I focused on driving. Mile markers passed slowly, each one seeming further apart than the last. The road curved unnaturally, with sharp angles that didn't match the maps in my mind. The flickering lights grew more frequent, closer now, and shadows darted in the corners of my vision. I forced myself to keep going, breathing shallow, eyes scanning every inch of the road. Hours seemed to stretch into eternity. Then finally I saw it, a truck stop. Not on my GPS, not on any map I recognized, but there it was, glowing with warm lights like a safe haven. The relief hit me like a wave. I pulled in, my tires crunching on gravel, and parked near the lights. The warmth of the fluorescent bulbs, the smell of diesel and fried food, the hum of other trucks, it all felt like life after a nightmare. I stepped out, stretched my legs, and tried to shake off the fear. Everything looked normal. There were drivers inside, people laughing, eating, filling their rigs with fuel. Nothing seemed out of place. I went in, bought a cup of coffee, and sat down to collect myself. It was then I learned the truth. The highway I had just driven, the stretch where the GPS died, the shadows moved, and the lights flickered, was under construction. Not scheduled construction, not signs posted weeks in advance, but emergency work after a series of sinkholes and road collapses. The authorities had cordoned off the area, but at night, with limited lighting and no workers visible, it was a maze. That's why the lines seemed off, the reflectors missing, the debris scattered. The floating lights were safety lamps, some knocked over by the wind, some placed on stakes in odd patterns to mark unstable sections. The truck I had seen slouched over the wheel, a maintenance rig abandoned because the crew had been evacuated earlier in the evening due to shifting ground. The shadows behind me were probably trees and signposts warped by the wind, tricking my tired eyes. It hit me slowly, the realization washing over me in a mix of relief and lingering dread. I hadn't been alone, not in a supernatural sense, but I had been exposed to one of the most dangerous stretches of road I had ever driven. Any other night, in daylight, it would have been manageable. But in the dark, when fatigue, isolation, and uncertainty combined, it became terrifying. I refueled, double-checked my load, and waited until dawn. When the first light hit the highway, I drove carefully through the area, noting every pothole, every tilt in the road, every hazard marker. What had felt like a surreal nightmare the night before was now painfully real. I called it in, reported the abandoned rig, and continued my journey, the fear slowly fading but leaving behind a newfound respect for how fragile life on the road can be. That night taught me something I will never forget. Fear doesn't need monsters or ghosts. Sometimes, it's just reality, magnified by darkness, silence, and the unknown. And on highways that stretch for miles with nothing around, that alone is enough to make a man question every mile he drives. I had always been the kind of person who enjoyed long drives at night. There was something about the emptiness of the road, the quiet hum of the engine, and the way the headlights cut through the dark that made me feel alive. That night, I was heading back from a late work assignment in a small town about 2 hours from home. The route I chose was the kind I had taken before, a long stretch of highway that ran through a mixture of dense forest and open plains. Usually, it was peaceful, but that night, it felt different, heavier somehow, like the air itself was pressing down on me. It started as soon as I passed the town limits. The last few streetlights faded behind me, and the highway opened up into an unbroken ribbon of black asphalt. The only sounds were my tires on the pavement and the faint roar of the engine. I glanced at my fuel gauge. Half a tank. Plenty to make it home. I didn't worry. I often drove these roads at night. I knew them like the back of my hand. But as the miles went by, I noticed something odd. There were no other cars. Normally, even this late, you'd see a truck or two, maybe a couple of cars heading in the opposite direction. Nothing. I could see far ahead, the road stretching into darkness, but it was empty. My unease started small, a flicker in my chest, but it grew the longer I drove. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just a quiet night. Maybe I was tired. Then, around the 2-hour mark, I saw something in the distance. At first, I thought it was a car parked on the side of the road, its brake lights dim and hazy through the darkness. As I got closer, I realized it was just a single pair of reflective orange cones marking something off. I slowed down instinctively. The cones looked freshly placed, like someone had been there recently. My headlights caught movement to the side, a figure standing just beyond the shoulder. I froze. I couldn't make out any details, just a tall shape, motionless, staring in my direction. My mind raced. Maybe someone was stranded. Maybe it was a worker or a hitchhiker. But something about the stillness, the way it didn't move even as I slowed, set my teeth on edge. I kept driving, my eyes darting between the road and the figure. After a moment, it disappeared behind a clump of trees, swallowed by the shadows. My pulse was racing, but I told myself it was just my imagination. I'd been driving too long. I needed a break. About 15 minutes later, the first real problem occurred. My car started making a strange noise, a metallic grinding sound, low and steady. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, heart hammering, and popped the hood. Everything looked normal. The belts were in place, the fluids were fine. No warning lights, no leaks, no smoke. I tapped the hood, cursed under my breath, and got back in. The sound continued. It wasn't loud enough to be catastrophic, but it was unnerving. I had no choice but to keep going. There were no towns around, no gas stations, nothing but the road and the dark. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to focus on the rhythm of driving, to drown out the noise. That's when I noticed something else. The lines on the road, the reflective white and yellow markers, were changing. Sections of the highway looked newer, cleaner, while others were cracked, worn, and covered in dirt. It was inconsistent, like the highway had been patched together over decades. I knew every stretch of this road, or at least I thought I did, and this didn't match any route I'd taken before. My sense of unease became sharper, almost physical. I glanced at my GPS. It was working, but the route it showed was wrong. I had no idea where I was. I considered stopping to check the map, but the shoulder was narrow, the trees pressed close, and the sense of being watched made me hesitate. I wasn't sure what I expected, maybe another figure in the dark. Maybe someone following me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Another 15 minutes passed. My headlights caught something unusual on the side of the road. A pile of tires, stacked neatly but in a clearing that made no sense. I had driven this stretch countless times and had never seen anything like it. I slowed down again, instinctively avoiding them. As I passed, I noticed the tires weren't just sitting there, they were arranged, almost like markers. There were even more ahead, scattered along the shoulder, leading into the darkness of the trees. Panic started to creep in. My mind tried to rationalize, maybe some farmer had dumped them, maybe someone used the clearing for something, but it didn't feel right. The way they were spaced, the way the shadows fell, made my stomach twist. I gripped the wheel and tried to stay calm. I told myself I'd see the next exit soon. That's when I saw the first car, or what I thought was a car. It was parked on the shoulder, headlights off, completely dark. It looked abandoned. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't abandoned, it was damaged. The windshield was cracked, the doors dented, and the tires looked flat. The engine wasn't running, no one was inside, and yet the car seemed staged, like someone had left it there deliberately. I slowed almost to a crawl, heart thumping in my ears, but didn't stop. After that, the road seemed to stretch endlessly. The trees closed in on both sides, the shadows thickened, and the highway twisted in ways I didn't recognize. My hands were clammy, my throat dry. The metallic grinding in my car grew louder. My headlights caught more oddities. An overturned sign, a broken guardrail, a patch of road freshly covered in black asphalt that ended abruptly. Hours passed, or maybe it was just one long, twisted stretch of time. I lost track of how far I had driven. Every few minutes, I would see something. A stack of tires, a car abandoned, strange markings on the asphalt. Nothing made sense, but I kept driving, gripping the wheel, promising myself I'd make it out. Finally, in the distance, I saw it. A small, dim light. It flickered, weak, but it was there. I pushed the accelerator, heart pounding. As I got closer, I realized it was a gas station. Not fancy, not big, just a small, solitary building with a flickering neon sign. Relief washed over me. I pulled in, parked, and got out, feeling the gravel beneath my shoes, feeling the air again. I checked my phone full bars. GPS corrected itself. I was back on a known route. The attendant was inside. Nothing unusual, just a tired man sipping coffee behind the counter. I refueled, checked my car, and asked quietly if the road ahead was normal. He smiled, nodded, and said it was fine. Just a long stretch, he said. Nothing more. Driving the final hour home felt like waking from a nightmare. The road returned to familiar lines, familiar curves. The night sky, the same as always, no strange shadows, no abandoned cars. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was just starting to rise. Exhausted, shaken, but alive. I never figured out what I had driven through that night. Looking back, I realized it wasn't haunted in the supernatural sense, but it was terrifying in a real human way. Abandoned vehicles, strange obstacles, a broken highway, the sense of being completely alone with potential danger lurking in every shadow. It was a perfect storm of fear, logic, and isolation. I had survived because I stayed focused, because I didn't stop when I should have, because I kept driving even when every instinct screamed to get out. That morning, I made a rule for myself. No more solo drives on unknown stretches of highway at night. Some roads, I realized, are haunted not by ghosts, but by neglect, by human error, and by the way darkness amplifies every uncertainty. Some stretches of asphalt, I thought, should never be traveled alone after dark. And I would never forget the long, dark stretch that made me feel like I was being watched, tested, and lost all at once. I had been driving for hours, my headlights cutting through the thick darkness like a dull knife. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of cracked asphalt flanked by dense woods that seemed to swallow any trace of the night sky. The radio was dead, a faint static, the only sound punctuating the hum of my engine. I didn't know exactly why I chose this route, the shortcut my friend had suggested, but the thought of arriving home even a few minutes earlier had made me take it. By the time the sun had fully dipped below the horizon, the world outside the windshield had gone completely black. At first, it was just the usual unease you get on a deserted road. My eyes strained against the dark, catching glimpses of trees that looked like they were pressing in from both sides, their branches swaying without wind. Occasionally, I would see a set of reflective eyes from some nocturnal animal in the distance, and my heart would jump, only to calm when the creature vanished into the shadows. The deeper I drove, the more the road seemed to change under me. Potholes appeared where there hadn't been any before, sharp dips that made the car shudder, and cracks that almost seemed to spiderweb across the asphalt. It felt wrong, but I told myself it was just fatigue, a trick of my mind after hours of driving alone. After what seemed like another hour, my headlights caught something unusual. A car, parked at the side of the road, just sitting there with its engine off. It was an old sedan, rust creeping along its wheel wells and hood. No lights, no one in sight. My first thought was to keep driving, but some small, inexplicable curiosity made me slow down. There were no buildings for miles, no signs of civilization. The road signs themselves had faded so badly I couldn't tell where I was or how far I had come. The car looked abandoned, but there was something in the way it sat, like it had been waiting for someone. As I passed it, my peripheral vision caught movement, a shadow slipping behind the car. I jerked the steering wheel slightly, my heart skipping. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it, but then I saw the shadow again, taller this time, moving with a strange purpose. I didn't stop, didn't even glance in the rearview mirror. My foot pressed harder on the gas, and I told myself it was just fatigue, or maybe a trick of the trees casting shadows in the headlights. The road started to narrow. The painted lines on the asphalt were long gone, and the shoulders were nothing more than gravel that crumbled under my tires. I kept driving, but now I noticed a change in the air itself. The wind had dropped entirely, leaving a silence so complete it felt like pressure against my ears. My car's engine sounded too loud, too insistent. The trees were taller here, darker, their branches stretching over the road, so I drove under a natural tunnel of leaves and limbs. Every time my headlights passed over a particularly large tree, I swore I saw something crouched behind it. It wasn't human, not entirely, but it moved with a weird intelligence that made me shiver. Hours, or maybe only minutes later, I came to a curve in the road that wasn't on any map I recognized. The asphalt ended abruptly, crumbling into gravel that fell sharply into a ditch. Beyond that, the road continued in a series of tight turns that seemed to go on forever. I slowed, but the car behind me, which I hadn't even noticed until now, didn't. A pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, bright and steady. Too close. My stomach dropped. I accelerated, pressing my foot down, but no matter how fast I went, the car behind me stayed just at the same distance. I twisted the wheel, took sharper turns, hoping it would lose me, but it didn't. Panic started to set in. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the headlights flicker. Then, to my absolute horror, I realized the car wasn't moving. It was stationary, hovering in place, yet somehow keeping pace with me. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I considered pulling over, maybe stopping and calling the police, but my phone had no signal. None. Every attempt to check a GPS map ended in failure. I was completely alone, with this thing following me, keeping pace with a silence that pressed down like a physical weight. Then I noticed it. The road markings, the gravel, the cracks, the edges of the road weren't behaving the way they should. Every time I took a turn, the road seemed to stretch longer, forcing me to drive farther to reach where I thought the turn would end. It was subtle at first, but after several miles, I realized the road wasn't following the natural geography of the land. It felt unnatural, wrong, as if I was trapped in a distorted version of reality where the laws of distance didn't apply. I tried to breathe, to calm myself. My eyes scanned the treeline desperately for a clearing, a sign of the world outside this nightmare. That's when I saw it, something lying across the road ahead. At first, I thought it was a fallen tree, but as I got closer, I realized it was a patch of oil slick, black and glossy, reflecting my headlights in jagged patterns. I slammed the brakes, my car skidding across the slick. Tires screeched, and my heart pounded in my chest. When I regained control, I looked in the rearview mirror again. The headlights behind me were gone, just gone. I drove cautiously, shaking, my hands trembling on the wheel. The road eventually leveled out, and after what felt like an eternity, I saw lights in the distance, a small gas station, neon flickering weakly, a single pump in front. I pulled in without thinking, leaving the car running, and ran inside. The place was empty. Dust covered the counters, newspapers from years ago scattered across the floor. There was a faint smell of gasoline and mildew. I went to the window, looking out at the highway, but it was empty. No cars, no signs of anyone. Hours later, as dawn broke, I finally drove off the highway onto a main road I recognized. The night had passed, and the woods seemed normal again. The trees were ordinary, the road straight and predictable. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something about that stretch of highway had been wrong. The curvature of the road, the car that followed me, the oil slick, it wasn't just fear or imagination. Something about that place warped perception, made the night longer, made distance stretch, made a simple drive feel like a trap. When I finally reached home, I parked the car in my driveway and sat there for a long time, staring at the empty street. I told myself it was over, that I had escaped, and maybe I had, but I never took that highway again. Friends warned me it was just a back road, unsafe because of potholes and wildlife. Maybe that's all it was. But sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I can still see the headlights following me, not moving, always there, waiting. And I know that if I ever end up back on that stretch of highway, it won't let me go so easily. I finally learned that some roads shouldn't be shortcuts, and some stretches of asphalt are better left undiscovered. The world can be scary without monsters, without ghosts, without anything supernatural. Sometimes it's just the darkness, the isolation, and the way a place can make your mind question reality. And that night, on that endless highway, I saw the real kind of horror, something that doesn't need to exist to terrify you. It only needs to be there, waiting for the next person who drives too far, too fast, too alone.